Let's start with committee introductions in the room first. Let's do that.
I'm Brian Reynolds, the Maliseet Tribal Representative to the Maine State Legislature.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Steve Wood, District 92, Green and Spatus.
Good afternoon, Senator Stacey Guerin, Senate District 4.
Good afternoon, Mike Lance, District 79, Paris, West Paris, Sumner, and the town of Woodstock.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Thorne, House 35, towns of Carmel and Herman in beautiful Penobscot County.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Dill. I represent House District 26.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Rick Mason. I represent District 97, which is the Moxie capital of the state of Maine, Lisbon.
Representative Clucci?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I am Sally Clucci. I represent House District 52, which includes the communities of Bowdoin, Bowdenham, and Richmond. And thank you for allowing me to participate remotely this afternoon.
Representative Terry? Oh, we can't hear you.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name
I haven't said that in a while.
Sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Parnell Terran and represent District 108 in Gorham.
And again, I'm Representative Tiffany Roberts. I represent House District 149 and the communities of North and South Berwick. We have our committee clerk, Sandlin, over there, and our committee analyst, Ms. Ann Davidson, over to my right, your left. That's all the housekeeping, right? Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll go in order unless there's another preference. No? Okay. So we're going to start with a report back on what was LD 1241, an act to make changes, an act to establish the Make Change for Wildlife program to support the Maine Endangered and Non-Game Wildlife Fund. And folks with the department, if you can kind of just let us know when whoever's presenting, if it's kind of a short questions after or a longer take them as we go thing. Thank you. Oh, got that answer.
Good afternoon, Representative Roberts, members of the committee. I'm Nate Webb. I'm the Wildlife Director for the department. This is a very short report back, as you can see, one page, front and back. So this is our report back for LD 1241, the Make Change for Wildlife program. And just to sort of jog everyone's memory, this program is intended to be a voluntary program that would allow voluntary customer contributions at the point of sale to the department's non-game and endangered wildlife fund. So we've been working on this program with Maine Audubon, I believe brought the bill forward initially with Representative Clucci. We've had some initial conversations with a few businesses throughout the state and generated some interest. And our plan is to launch the program officially later on this year once we have completed a few more of those conversations. And we'll be working with Maine Audubon to do that and to roll it out. So really nothing to report beyond that. It's still in progress. We don't recommend any additional legislation or anything like that at this point. Happy to take any questions.
So you don't need anything from us? Okay.
No, we don't.
Questions from the
Don't need
committee?
anything.
Online. I don't know which one to look at. That was easy.
Great.
Right?
We can make them all that short.
This may be a very quick meeting. Or I jinxed us. So now we're going to move on to a report back on, let's see, it was LD 1763, which is an act to regulate non-water dependent floating structures on Maine's waters. I feel like this is going to be longer.
Your feeling would be correct.
Is this a questions as we go, or if there's certain sections, you can kind of let us know.
I'd probably suggest just waiting till the end because
Okay.
I'll probably answer a lot of the questions.
Okay.
I would suspect. I've got to get my link set up here.
As she's doing that, I'm going to say this every meeting to members, just make sure you check for bill jackets that need to be signed. Not bill jackets, vote sheets.
Need to find the link so I can share my PowerPoint here. Find that. There it is. Nope, this is for Josh. Sandlin, did you send that to me last Friday? Mhm. It's the same one. Let me try it.
You trying to get in as a panelist?
Yeah, it was one of our other staff's names on it, but maybe I just need to change the name. Should work. Looks like it's let me in. It's working. Okay. Eric muted it. Yes. All right. So trying. If I join as a panelist, I can share, right? All right, now.
Here we go.
Okay, let's go into slideshow mode. It should, there we go. All right. Good afternoon, Representative Roberts and members of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. I'm Crystal Terrio, Assistant to the Commissioner at Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Today I'm going to give a moderately short report back or summary on the law that was passed this last September. And it was called an Act to Regulate Non-Water Dependent Floating Structures on Maine's Waters, Public Law 2025, Chapter 378. So as a reminder, last session, this committee worked through a bill to address floating homes, or what we now call non-water dependent floating structures. Subsequently, Chapter Law 378, an act to regulate non-water dependent floating structures on Maine's waters, passed September 24th of last year. This law required our agency to submit a report to this committee with updated information on these structures in the state and the implementation of the act. The report allowed us to include recommendations for statutory changes, as the committee has the authority to report out a bill this session. There are two proposals that we have, and they're included at the end of the report. I'll just hit a little bit of background on this law as a reminder, because you deal with a lot of different things, and This has quite a history of about 5 years in the making. So this topic first came to our attention in 2021 during the first session of the 130th legislature. Representative Paul Stearns introduced LD 626, an act to clarify temporary mooring privileges for inland waters. While this didn't remain focused on moorings, it sort of turned into other floating structures. The committee tasked IFNW and ACF Bureau of Parks and Lands to compile relevant laws, rules, and municipal ordinances that would possibly have regulatory standing on this matter and present it back to this committee in 2022. Over the next couple of years, a task force was developed through legislation, and there was a multitude of agencies and stakeholders that worked on this stakeholder group, which brought forward the proposed legislation that you saw last year and was passed into law. So let's see here. Just going to give a little overview on what this law did because it was lengthy and pretty complex. So it implemented a prohibition on the placement or use of a non-water dependent floating structure on internal waters of the state. The law defined a non-water dependent floating structure and also what non-dependent uses were for. Those included a function and location other than the surface waters of the state and that do not require for their primary purpose location on submerged lands or direct access to internal waters. The law also included several exemptions for functionally water-dependent uses, like swimming structures, water toys, ice fishing shacks, aquaculture facilities, authorized non-water-dependent floating structures, and pre-existent non-water-dependent floating structures. As you remember, there was a lot of discussion about ones that were currently on the landscape that ran businesses, and they really sought some sort of exemption. So the law also created criteria for those that would be authorized, and for the pre-existing structures. There was penalties that were created if somebody were to violate the law and so on and so forth. The law included allowance for structures with confirmed existence as of last January 1st, 2025. So if somebody could prove that they were in existence, that was part of the criteria to be able to apply for a lease. The lease program is currently managed by the Submerged Lands Program, which is under the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. The law included detailed information regarding the application requirements, the process that they have in place, and the renewal process for the leases. This law also clarified the regulation of houseboats and homemade watercraft under the laws regarding watercraft or regulating watercraft, excuse me. I'd like to talk a little bit about the implementation of the law, and it's a little bit tedious, but there was so much work that went into this from 3 different agencies and multiple bureaus, and I see a question.
We were gonna have her go all the way through and then ask questions because she thought she'd probably answer some of them.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So last July, there was comprehensive training that was provided to agency staff who needed involvement in the implementation. The staff included in this training were from IFNW, DMR, and Submerged Lands Program. IFNW put this training on. The new staff training goals were to ensure that the staff understood the history of this law, learn about what non-water dependent floating structures were and the prohibition for them. We wanted them to be able to inspect questionable watercraft and floating structures, have knowledge of who to contact and what their role was in the process so that they could reach out to other staff from other agencies. We wanted to ensure that they could identify when a structure had been registered as a motorboat, learn what would be questionable and what the process is to determine that it is a non-water dependent floating structure, or that it could be continued to be registered as a motorboat. We also had the goals of them understanding how a non-water dependent floating structure can obtain a lease to continue existing on the water and understand IFNW's licensing role and having a comprehensive review, which totaled over 200 different motorboats that had been registered since 2018. And what we did to try to figure out where some of these structures were on the landscape that we didn't already know about was licensing said, let's look at the motorboats that have been registered since 2018 that fall into three categories of sort of homemade, which would have been houseboat, cabin, or other. So those three categories that there's multiple categories that are required by the Coast Guard, but those are three of them. And we felt like those would be at higher risk of being a non-water dependent floating structure. So licensing went through all those and sent over 200 certified letters to ensure that these people were notified about the change. And I'd like to briefly review each of the agencies' role in this new law because it was such a huge team effort and all the agencies really stepped up and worked well together. So IF&W trained staff on the law initially in July. We talked a lot about how to ID these structures. We showed a lot of examples. We provided a general overview of the application for a hull identification number. We talked about how to determine which agency would do what during the inspection. The licensing staff at IF&W created a notification letter and an inspection form, and we provided an overview of the inspection process. The licensing division, again, I sort of mentioned this, but they sent out more than 200 certified letters, which were sent to motorboat owners whose motorboats were identified as potential non-water dependent floating structures. From this outreach, responses were received from approximately 55 customers, and only 7 of them ultimately were confirmed as non-water dependent floating structures. Those individuals were directed to contact the Submerged Lands program for further guidance, so they reached out to John Knoll if they felt like they should. In addition to customer outreach, staff engaged in targeted training and stakeholder communication. On November 18th, the team trained with the Maine Harbor Masters Association and all their members to review the prohibition and discuss enforcement considerations. Licensing also trained their Moses agents. Those are all of our agents who sell licenses and registrations at town offices and other retail locations. So through this, they were able to train over 230 participants during 11 different classes. To support even broader public awareness, the Information and Education Division at IF&W also distributed a memo to all motorboat registrants and shared information on social media in early December to make sure that they were informed of the new law change. So Warden Service and Marine Patrol from the Department of Marine Resources functioned similarly in that we trained all of the lieutenants within each of the jurisdiction or each of the agencies. And those lieutenants went out into the field and actually made contact with all the existing structures that we knew about to make them aware of the change. And let's see, the Submerged Lands program, their role was significant in that they're obviously going to be processing the lease applications. And the criteria that was developed in law was that the lease application would have to be received by the Submerged Lands program by this last January 1st, 2026. The applicant would have to include a $500 application fee. They'd have to include a photo of the structure, contact information, the intended use, and a description of the structure. The Submerged Lands program already operates on it's a program that processes all kinds of leases. So they will also allow a 30-day public comment period for a lease application. They have to notify any abutting landowners and the town. They'll have a preliminary findings timeframe, a 30-day reconsideration period, and then final findings and decision will be made so the lease can be issued. Annually, the person who owns the non-water dependent floating structure is going to have to renew their lease and pay a $500 fee, or it's a renewal fee. I'll have to look and see what that fee amount is. But the lease has a 10-year term every time it needs to be renewed. So let's see. Additional approval criteria from the Submerged Lands Program. I'm gonna skip some of that. Went over most of that. As of this date, that we're reporting this, the Submerged Lands Program has accepted 8 non-water dependent floating structure applications from 6 different people. None of the 8 lease applications have been processed as of this date, but the Submerged Lands Program has had telephone and email communication with 5 other parties to discuss their floating structure. They fielded several calls from motorboat owners regarding the IFNW letter that they received. And then the Submerged Lands Program staff have also spoke with 3 owners of floating structures over the phone, but they wouldn't divulge their names or provide the location of the structures. And I thought I would kind of give you sort of a statistical overview of what we know is on the landscape. Right now, we're aware of 23 total structures, 12 known on inland waters. There were 12, but one's been removed from Green Lake in 2024. There are 11 structures on coastal waters. 8 of the 23 are thought to be for commercial use versus personal use. There's one non-profit structure, and then we don't know of any that are located on unorganized territories. They're not supposed to be. They weren't supposed to be prior to this law, so. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this as quickly as I can, but we did have a couple of small amendments we'd like to make to the current law. So we're proposing a couple of changes. It looks lengthy, but I really basically used the whole law that we had and just made sure we made some changes there. And skip over here. So after implementing the new law, staff suggested that internal waters should be replaced with waters of the state and coastal waters should be replaced with territorial waters. And
Is this on page 15? Is that?
that is on, it starts on page, hang on a minute. Might be 19. Nope, it's previous to that. Starts on page 15.
Okay.
So there's 2 terms that we want to replace, which would be more accurate and align more with the intent of what's going on. And then the second proposal is put forth at the request of the U.S. Coast Guard. They brought to IFNW's attention that there was a preemption issue within one of the sections of the law that requires visibility from the helm of a homemade watercraft. So it's a very specific area of this law, but there's no requirement in CFR 183, which is Code of Federal Regulations, to have visibility from the helm. So their suggestion was to refer to standards on visibility that are provided by the American Boat and Yacht Council. And that you can see on page 15 of your report if you have interest in that. Well, that's where the proposals start. And then I wanted to just make you aware that after the actual report back to several appendix, the first one is a watercraft inspection letter that starts on page 9. And these were forms that IFNW created to try to notify folks and help with the process. And if you turn to page 11, that's a marine surveyor inspection letter. And then on page 13, there's an overview of the jurisdiction and authority for non-water dependent floating structures that each of the agencies has involvement with. So it's really helpful in trying to explain the sort of cross-jurisdictional issues and what this law actually did to clear some of the loopholes up. I think it's been quite effective. So. And then again, starting on page 15 and to the end is the possible legislative proposals if this committee is supportive of those. And just real quick to wrap things up, I wanted to show one of the structures. You've seen it before, but this was one of the issues that we had. I think it was up in Machias. And it created real havoc for the town and it ended up washing up on shore, sort of falling apart. The owner moved to California. There was whole to do about it. And it was very expensive to have this removed. And this is one of the things we're trying to prevent. And then as a quick reminder, there's a lot of states and other countries whose shoreline looks like this. And I think this is one of the goals with the laws to try to prevent this. So we appreciate the support. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Real quick, and I've got members here on the appendix 3 on page 13. Lepsi's on here. Now I know that it's moving over into Mocha. So is this on their radar as well?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a great question. I can
think
make them
I think
aware.
I don't know if it already has moved or it's, I know that it's going from Parks and Land over into,
Land Use Planning Commission, well,
yeah, the whole,
they'd want to be aware, obviously, of this
Mm.
change. I think they are, but if they're going into Mocha, then yeah, we can certainly make
okay.
those folks aware.
Representative Thorne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we had talked about it, Crystal, when we got to the totals, that there were 12 inland, 11 coastal.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question was, this was meant to head off a potential problem? Because, I mean, the 11 coastal, 12 inland, can you disclose what bodies of water they're on?
Yes, they're actually listed right below that in the report on page 7. So you can see the owner or the name of the applicant, the location. Most of them give locations, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sebec Lake, Ken Ackley's is on, Anabessacook.
And this year, there's been 8 requests so far.
Yes.
And you had mentioned that there were, it was $500 a year.
Yeah, I need to check that in the law because, I don't know if John.
The application is $500.
Oh,
And
can I have
have to
him?
go up, sorry.
And
Yeah.
Crystal, if you wouldn't mind stop sharing so that I can see.
Yes.
The
I
other
can do that.
ones, that'd be great.
Mhm. It is, I
Yeah.
know the initial application fee is $500 and I'm not sure what the annual fee is.
And that's good for 10 years.
Yes. But presumably, so the folks that have applied for this lease would have had to have done it prior to this January 1st. So there'll be no more exemptions. This is it.
And probably under the conditions that they don't change that location or
Right.
Condi-
Or
or
they would
size
have
of
to,
the-
they'd have to still adhere to the criteria to be able to apply for it because they have to own right title or interest to the adjacent land. There's a bunch of other criteria, but if you have more specific questions about the application process, Director John Knoll is here from the Submerged Lands program too.
And earlier you stated that there were 55 submitted and only 7 approved,
No, the 50,
qualified.
um,
I think you used the word qualified.
that was a different context of,
Okay.
hang on a second. I don't want you to confuse that with actual applications. That I think, let me get back to you in a minute. Let me just look
Okay.
through my information, but I know it was related to the motorboat registration process,
Mhm.
not the non-water dependent floating structure application process.
And I know it's only been a couple of years, but do you feel that this is addressing, I hesitate to use the word problem, condition or
Well, it's only been 4 months since the law went into effect and we haven't had a boating season, so it's a little hard to predict, although the ones that we were aware of, I mean, staff have addressed those if they were willing to.
Mm-hmm.
We all presume there will be structures that will come to light and the owners may not have been aware of the law change because they wouldn't fall into the category of having to have registered a motorboat, or they just weren't aware of it for some reason, or they may not want to comply with it. So we'll
Did-
have to address those on a case by case basis.
And on this one, didn't we say that you had to apply or something before a certain date and you had to be
Mhm.
between like 1 January, already had to have a condition? And is that the 55 that you spoke of?
No,
No.
I need to look back in my notes here. I don't want you to
Or
be
20,
confused with
yeah.
that. Oh, thank you. That was, when I mentioned the 55, it was 55 customers that responded to IFNW certified letters. That's my understanding. Just asking questions about the law change. They didn't necessarily have a non-water dependent floating structure, but they wanted to ensure that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
If you wanted to ask more specific questions, Angie Dion is here from licensing, but
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Representative Wood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when I was at NASP, a good friend of mine from Oklahoma, another state rep, he had questions about this law because Oklahoma may want to take this and back to there. So he's got a 36-foot pontoon boat. It's got a 10-foot enclosed area on it with a slide, 200 horse Mercury on it. We'll pull a water skier, and it's all self-enclosed. Would that be considered a floating home?
That's a loaded question. Well, it depends on how it's constructed. So
It's all
obviously-
self-contained.
It's homemade.
No.
It's not homemade.
This is
So it
factory
probably-
made.
Yeah, so if it would probably be considered a motorboat and that they could register it as such. I mean, it would be
Okay.
hard for me to say without looking at it. But am
Thanks.
I right, John?
Any other questions from Senator Garen?
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you put into this. I know we've tasked you with quite a project.
For a lot of people, but
So on page 7, it has the list of 12 that were observed. And how many of those have applied to? Do we know?
I'm gonna pass
Hi,
the.
John
microphone.
Knoll, Director of the Submerged Lands Program. Of those 12, you can see underneath a handful of them, it says submitted lease application.
Mhm.
So in the Great Ponds, that would be Ken Ackley. That would be the one on Sebago, which is Camp Wahello. I think that were the only 2 Great Pond, and all the remainder were on coastal waters. So the 3 at Director Robin Hood and St. George, I think it is, Front Street Shipyard. There was a floating sauna in Kennebunkport. Yeah. Kennebunkport River. DeMillo's, as we said, has pre-existed this whole question, and they're included in their existing submerged lands lease, so they were exempt right off the bat.
So for the ponds and lakes that we were talking about in committee, only 2 have applied. And
Only
the-
2 have applied,
And the
yes,
deadline is passed.
has
So
passed.
that means we will only have 2 on main lakes for the next 10 years.
2 that are permitted by the current law, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Whitson?
Thank you. Going back to Representative Wood's question. Is that situation where it's a manufactured boat, obviously high end, just a possibility of people who have the means of buying something expensive like that, getting around this law?
No, I don't think so. If it's manufactured and has a hull identification number and manufactured by a manufacturer, even if it's homemade, if it meets the requirements of a true houseboat, then it would be permitted in law to register as a motorboat. So there's very precise requirements to be able to meet the standards for a motorboat now versus what a non-water dependent floating structure would be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Clucci and Representative Parnell here. Good. If you wouldn't mind on the legislative ask slash need slash whatever. Am I seeing correctly that on page 22, is that the only part? That's the part that came from the Coast Guard? And then it seems like everything highlighted on the other pages is just consistency and definition cleanup. Can you
exactly
just
right.
kind of walk through exactly what that definition cleanup is so everyone's clear?
I may ask Colonel Talbot from Marine Resources to come up. I understand it to a point, but he might be able to answer some very detailed questions about the differences and the definitions.
Yeah.
It does get a little bit confusing.
I just want to make sure that the committee has a good idea of what,
Sure.
you know,
Are you all set with me, do you think? Or I can sit here while you go through the legislation.
I'm not hearing otherwise.
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
Representative Roberts, committee members. Excuse me, my name's Matt Talbot. I'm the Colonel of the Maine Marine Patrol. Obviously, we worked in conjunction with IF&W on the implementation of this statute, whereas it does affect things on the coastal waters. So I guess just to speak to this a little bit, as often happens when you go to implement a new statute, you find issues that you may have not realized while the bill was being drafted. The edits that were made were to try to, I guess, clarify the language being used so that it was properly applied. Most of the definitions used in the statute were pre-existing and used elsewhere in different titles within Maine revised statutes. So probably the catalyst to this conversation
Sure thing.
was the fact that previously the term internal waters was used basically to describe both coastal and inland waters, which by definition really I think was only meant to refer to inland waters, what we'd know as freshwater, which caused the discussion about changing that definition to waters of this state, which speaks to both inland waters. It's fairly straightforward. Freshwaters, inland waters, above head of tide, basically. It becomes a little bit more confusing on saltwater, where the state and the federal government both have jurisdictions depending on where on the federal water it is. The coastal waters definition that was previously used was from Title 38, which, although probably usable and accurate, we felt would be better replaced by the term territorial waters. Coastal waters, obviously I don't necessarily need to read it, but in Title 38 goes out to 12 nautical miles for their purposes, where that's really not an issue for this statute. Territorial waters is used in Title 12, or at least Marine Resources portion of Title 12, to refer to tidal water out to 3 nautical miles, which would encompass all the needs of this statute. So
it's using another already existing.
Correct.
Okay, we're not
Yes.
creating a whole new.
We're not.
Okay, good.
Nope. Nope. And then obviously the other, so we struck internal waters, replacing it with waters of the state, which also was a pre-existing definition in IF&W's portion of Title 12. and struck coastal waters and replaced it with territorial waters.
And that's just the rest of the highlights there of that, except for the last page.
Exactly. So just in summary, that basically leaves you with inland waters, which is freshwater, territorial waters, meaning salt water, and then waters of the state, all encompassing. So.
This is almost, if I might, could be part of our omnibus bill, but because there was the ability to report out a bill with this report back, we just provided it within the report, so completely up to you.
Representative Thornton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clarify for me, because I'm thinking in my head of all the sailboats that have the galleys and the cabins down below, that more out on, this does not apply to them.
No, I think the easiest way for me to kind of reconcile this in my head is first of all, anything that is a true watercraft, meaning you can take it from point A to point B under its own power. It's registered. It would have the appropriate navigation equipment, running lights, and all that kind of stuff, are going to qualify as a watercraft. So that takes your example off the board. The representative's example of the pontoon boat with the enclosure and the slide, likely off the conversation. As you recall, it's a non-water dependent floating structure. So it's a floating structure that its primary purpose does not rely on it being floating on any sort of body of water.
So we don't have any that fit into that category where they're not operational. Sailboat with no sails, no motor, sitting out in there moored.
The fact whether, no, because no. The quick answer is no.
Okay.
Probably the closest example that I can give you on coastal waters would be a bait float, a float with a shack on it that a lobsterman is going to store his bait and fishing equipment on. That looks like potentially a non-water dependent floating structure, but its primary purpose relies directly on being on the water. So that would be exempt.
Unless there's a guy living in it.
Can you turn your mic on?
Unless there's a guy living in it.
And yeah, then we need to figure that out. But if they're still using it to store bait, then I'd say you're all set. So.
Any other questions from the committee?
One of the things I'll just say about that is we did specifically define like houseboat so that it would differentiate between a non-water dependent floating structure and a watercraft that you can actually live aboard. Those are legal and will continue to be legal to be registered as a motorboat if they have a motor on it. But these homemade sort of floating homes that aren't meant to be driven and that's not their primary purpose would not fall into that category.
Last chance, anyone? No? I think we're good there.
Thank you for your time.
Do we want to, folks, do a straw poll now? So we can, the quicker we move through business, the quicker we're done in the month span of things. I don't know if we want to do a straw poll to report out a bill based on this text that we would then have a public hearing for in a work session and all of that, if that makes sense. We just get a raise of hands. Okay. Ms. Davidson, you have your charge. That was easy. All right.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure. Do you need Crystal back up or?
No, but I'm just wondering if we need to do, given the fact that these are such small changes, I'm wondering if we should consider voting a bill just right to the floor rather than having a whole public hearing on these minor changes.
Yeah.
It's really minor changes.
Do you want to, right? Do you want to come up and just explain the process to folks? I think I personally think that makes sense. Thank you, Representative Clushy. I'm just gonna have Ann walk it through.
Yes,
with
you can
folks.
absolutely do that. You'll need to take a formal vote today if you want to report it straight to the floor.
Okay, and that motion would be just,
To initiate the bill, but you're voting on the language that is in the proposed amendment in the report you just received on page 15.
Representative Wood.
I make a motion, we put out a bill and pass the bill as amended with all the amendments that are recommended by IFW.
All right, that was Representative Wood and then seconded by Representative Mason. Sir, we have discussion? No? Okay. Call roll.
Great. For the motion to create a bill, Representative Lance.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Thorne.
Yay.
Representative Thorne voting yay. Representative Dill.
Yes.
Representative Dill voting yes. Representative Mason.
Yes.
Representative Mason voting yes. Representative Roberts.
Yes.
Representative Roberts voting yes. Senator Gearin.
Yes.
Senator Gearin voting yes. Representative Woodsum.
Yes.
Representative Woodsum voting yes. Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Wood voting yes, and Representative Reynolds.
Yes.
Representative Reynolds voting yes. And
They
I-
can,
do we do it
they can
online?
record their votes tomorrow.
Yeah.
Does that work for representatives online? To stop in and record your votes tomorrow?
Thank you.
What?
I think they
Can
can
they?
vote. I want someone
I
else.
think
to
as
vote.
long as we can see them
Okay,
and hear them, I think they can vote right now.
sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Representative Terry.
Yes.
Representative Terry voting yes, and Representative Clucci.
Yes.
Representative Clucci voting yes. So that's unanimous of the votes
Perfect.
in the
Thank you.
moment.
Thank you. It's been a while since we've been in that mode. I'm like. All right. I know, that's the worst thing that can happen is we find out we were incorrect. All right, so let's move on to the next report back on. So this was for LD 139, which was a resolve directing the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to study establishing oh, so this is a continue, that's that one. Okay. So we are on, well, we had like round 2.5 because we were getting somewhere and then we didn't have a senator. So this is around the electronic tagging deer. We've had the report back from the department. We've had some discussion within committee. We are at a point now where we would take a straw poll to report out a bill. The department did provide a model. Doesn't mean that has to be what we end up with, but it can be where we start in reporting out a bill. Then we would have public hearing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if folks have discussion on this or if we want to take a straw poll. Representative Wood.
I would like to go ahead and do the straw poll
poll?
for a bill.
Get started. All right, sounds good. All right, so all those in favor of reporting out a bill on the electronic tagging with the draft and then going from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question.
Oh, sure.
We do still have an opportunity to discuss the bill, correct?
Yes, there will be a
Okay.
full public hearing, work sessions, discussions, maybe
Okay.
amendments, who knows?
Good.
Right? Are we good? All right. That is that there. Representative Dill, did you?
Yeah, I'm for doing the bill.
Yes, okay. on other items, did you want to take up anything else today and explain to the committee what?
What I'd like to do is I'd like to reconsider a bill last week that we voted out on the inland moorings. And the amendment was that we actually added another municipal person to the committee. And that was a person that had ordinances concerning moorings. I would also like to add a municipal person that has an inland water but does not have a mooring. And there's a couple reasons. That's probably just a different slant on the different towns and how they look at inland moorings. And also it would make it an odd number on the committee, which is probably not real crucial when you got like 13 people, because you're probably not going to have everybody there anyway. But at least if everybody's there, you've got an odd number, and that at least takes away the split vote. So what I would propose is that we reconsider the bill and amend it by adding that one thing. So my motion is to reconsider the moorings bill. We
Okay.
still have it, right? And
We do, and for anyone listening, this is LD 2023 resolved to establish a working group to establish ways to manage moorings on inland waters.
thank you.
We have a motion to reconsider and second by Representative Wood. All those in favor, you can do a hand. Okay, that's back open. The motion,
Yeah, I would move that we amend LD 2023, what was it?
2023.
2023. To include one more member on that, and that would be a member of a municipality that has is contiguous to a inland body of water that does not have an ordinance in place.
you have a motion, right? So Representative Dill, then Representative Wood second it. Is there any discussion? Keep forgetting to look up, sorry, so just like yell if I don't. All right, is the committee ready for a vote? It's odd because I spent my first session chairing during COVID. Should know it.
Okay, on the motion to amend the reconsidered bill? Or reconsider the bill? What's the motion?
Yeah, this is about to pass as amended.
Pass as
Yep.
amended. Okay, great. On the motion about to pass as amended, Representative Clucci.
Yes.
Representative Clucci voting yes. Representative Lance?
Yes.
Representative Lance voting yes. Representative Terry?
Yes.
Representative Terry voting yes. Representative Thorne?
Yay.
Representative Thorne voting yay. Representative Dill?
Yes.
Representative Dill voting yes. Representative Mason?
Yes.
Representative Mason voting yes. Representative Roberts?
Yes.
Representative Roberts voting yes. Senator Guerin?
Yes.
Senator Guerin voting yes. Representative Woodsum?
Yes.
Representative Woodsum voting yes. And Representative Wood?
Yes.
Representative Wood voting yes. And Representative Reynolds?
Yes.
Representative Reynolds voting yes. Unanimous on all counts.
All right, perfect. So that is that. And do we have anything? Nope. No?
But I will bring that language back to you on Wednesday.
Okay. We just saved time, folks, by rather than waiting for that to come back to add it on so it's ready. So that's good. Anything from the committee? Okay. It's 2:00 and I feel we're doing this, but I'll entertain a motion. All right, so moved. All those in favor? Oh, wait. Do we need to unadjourn? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Judy Camuso, Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. This was not related to any bills, but I did want to let you all know that we do have a date for your rescheduled Bear Den visit, Friday, March 6th. So I'm not sure which site we'll be going to, either the Bradford or the Down East study area, but we'll let you know as the date gets closer. But again, that is for committee members only. And I will bring a few guests with me as well, including, I think our assistant AG might join. But so we'll get you details, but I just wanted you to get that on your calendars because it's not actually that far away. It's a little bit earlier than we've normally gone. And that's because the past couple of winters toward the cub season, the winter starts ending quickly and we've had trouble getting folks into the den. So we're kind of pushing it as early as we can to try and ensure a productive visit for you all.
And you'll let us know when you need
Head
a
count. Yeah,
head count.
for sure.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Now, when you say committee members only, you're not talking about everybody's grandmother and kids and everybody else.
Correct.
That's happened in the past.
That's right. The goal for this is really for our committee to kind of spend some time in the field together with our staff, understand the program that the department manages and have just a quick glimpse into the day in the life of a biologist, particularly a bear biologist. So it really is targeted for you all and a few other select legislators and folks that I will invite. So you can't change. If you don't want to go, you can't say, I can't go, but my friend over in ACF wants to go. So there are a few other folks from appropriations that I'll invite. But it is really, you all are the target audience and the beneficiaries. So.
You good? All right.
Thank you.
Exciting. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow and then Wednesday, right? Yeah.